We are now on patch 14.3 and here is all the strongest comps and how to play them. We do only have 2 patches left before we start playing on the PPE for set 11, and that also means it's almost the last chance to hit your rank this set. The first comp we're gonna look at is AD Flex, and this is also the comp that I mentioned in my top 5 comps for this patch the other day. And mainly we are looking for a comp where we can play around hearts in the early to mid game. So that means we are playing that and getting a lot of gold and getting up in levels fast. You could also argue this is like a fast 9 or how to play fast 9. So if you don't know what that is, you can watch my video about that. But the main thing is that we want to go to level 8 as fast as possible and play around Israel. And if we can do that, we will put these items on him, and else we will just play similar items. And the same goes for Jin if we are getting him as well. Tank items will go on Ilauri and Bruiser items on Yorick. We're mainly just putting items on units that we are getting up in stars. So if we are getting Jin early, we start putting items on him. The same goes for Ilauri and so on. What we can look for in this comp before we're hitting this board is just units that are similar to these. So let's say we're not having Ilauri yet. We will just play something like Zac. If we do not have Jin yet, we will play another big shot unit. And obviously, as you can see, there's only 3 here. That means we hopefully are getting him as a headliner. But your comp doesn't have to look like this. It is just like an option and the one that are performing the best if you're getting yourself to level 9. Other things that we could look at before this is taking out Kayn, since we don't have to play around hearts. But the main thing is that you are getting as much gold as possible, saving as much health as possible, get up in levels and try to stabilize at level 8. And when you have done that, go to level 9 and start getting in all of these 5-cost units. Tiny Titans to have more time, more items and crit to everyone is quite good options. The best performing comp in the current patch. Next up we have Twin Terror. So this comp is one of the best comps from last patch. It got nerfed, but it is still very playable. Are you getting this augment? Well, then you can go for this board. Just get up in levels to level 6 and start playing as many of the same units as possible. And when you have the chance, try to switch in so you're getting these 4 units and having multiple of them. If possible, try to stabilize with having 2-cost units of them, or at least one of them as 2-cost, and then get to level 7 and play so you are getting all of these 4 units to 3-star. In the best case, we are looking for Vex and Switch mainly as the headliner, and in the best case, we are getting the one with Executioner. And if we're getting that, we could even argue to take out Pantheon and put in another Executioner, so we are getting 4 in the trait. It could also just be something like Samira. It doesn't really matter. Really good comp if you're getting the augment early. Just play for this if there is no other playing the same comp. When it comes to items, just classic tank items on Amumu, classic AP and mana items on Vex, and classic Twitch items on Twitch. That means Infinity Edge, something to take down the front line, and Red Buff is just performing well on Twitch every time. Next up we have Executioner, and this is the comp where we want to have 6 in Executioners, and that means we want to have Samira or Vex as the headliner. We could even go for Twitch, but I do prefer one of these 2. But no matter what, we kind of have to have 6 in the trait. So what we want to do is just to play a strong board as early in the game, and then when we get to level 7 we will sell the headliner and try to play around this board. We are obviously going for these 2 units early in the game and at least just getting them to 2-star. After we get to level 7 we can do a big roll down, hitting the headliner and try to get all of these units to at least 2-star and hitting the other units that we need. I do prefer playing around 6 Executioners early, and that means we are taking out Fresh to have this board at level 7. Depending on which unit you are getting to 3-star first, and depending on what unit that you're having as a headliner, you will put items on that unit first, and from there, just put items on everyone else as well. Vex want at least 1 mana item, but then 2 other damage items. If the frontline is fairly weak, she will just one-shot 4 units at the time. Samira is better at solo target, and Twitch is something in between. When it comes to items for Amumu, we would prefer to have this, but another option could just be having something else that could be hard instead. It could also be something like Crown Guard, but else just make him as tanky as possible. Expoke's weakness is just a great item. It means we can skip something like Last Whisper and put something else. Heroic is also an option, and something where we are getting more of these units faster is also quite good. This is my personal favorite and the one that I am clamping with at the moment. I do think it is way stronger than the stats shows and is also a little bit underplayed at the moment. Next up we have True Damage Senna. And obviously Senna gonna be the carry. We are looking to get her to 3-star and she has to be the headliner as well. Are we going for True Damage or the rapid fire one? Doesn't really matter. You can use both of them. You just have to hit her as the headliner. We are playing Superfans and that means we are getting an item for free. And when it comes to Senna, we are getting the Shojin one for free. And that means we want to build something like Tooth or something like Rageblade. We could also just go for something like Jewel Gauntlet, but else items like this is probably her preferred one. After prioritizing items for Senna, we are looking for items for Echo, and here we'll just put in all the tank items. It could also be something like Sunfire Cape and Spark for anti-magic resist. When these two units have their items, we will look for items for Kali, and she will just have something like Edge of Night, Infinity Edge, and a healing item like Hand of Justice. It could also be Bloodthirster, and we will also put Akali and Kiana just a little bit in the back. Obviously, are we getting Sona as a true damage, we can just play this board, but are we not and having the headliner that are rapid fire, we will not play failures, and then we kind of have to put in another unit to get 6 in the trade, and that will be Yasuo. Are we getting to this point with the headliner with rapid fire? We will add in something like Ari and getting the KDA online, and then we have to move our units a little bit around so they're standing in the right position. And if we're getting the other one with true damage, we are not playing Yasuo, but we are again putting Ari in, and then we need to have another unit. And in the first case, we are having a failures as before, but whenever we get to the late game and we have the chance to put in Lucian instead, we are doing that. When it comes to augments, a specific one for the current trait that we are using, we could also go for something like Lucky Streak. If we are getting a Senna early, we can build up and getting a lot of gold, get her to 3-star fast, and then going just for a snowball up in levels. Getting more units faster is also a good option. It is just a comp that are performing really well, and it is just super easy to hit since we just need one of the Sennas as our headliner. Next up, we have Pentakill with Karthus. So in this board, we are hopefully getting Karthus as the headliner and as a Pentakill. And that also means that we are getting ourselves a free item on Karthus. But the main thing about this comp is that we want to get to 7 Pentakills. So at level 8, we can only play 5 Pentakills if we are not having an emblem. And that means if we're getting the option to get an emblem, this comp gets way better and have a huge spike at level 8. But else we're just playing for 5 Pentakills and are playing the same board and try to get to level 9, where we can play 7 Pentakill once again. And that obviously means that we have to have one of the 2 other units on the board. When we are playing Superfans in this board, we are getting ourselves an Archangel for free, but these 2 other items is probably the best ones for him. We want something that makes us do more damage, and else just a mana item like Sojourn, which is way better than blue buff, but another option could also be Adaptive Helm. Other options is to play around Viego as the headliner, and these are the classic items that you would put on him. Something that heals us and something that keeps him alive. The same thing kind of go with Mordekaiser, where you are playing for this comp and going up in levels, and you are getting yourself some Mordekaisers, and then you suddenly see him as a Pentakill headliner. Then you can pick him up, get him to 3-star and play around that. Then you again just playing the same board. There is also an option where you are playing for a reroll Kale, but I haven't really played it that much and I haven't really tested it, so I don't really want to go into that. But the main thing should be that you're getting her to 3-star and putting a lot of Rage Blades on her. When it comes to augments, a specific one, more crit for the full board and something that keeps us alive is probably the best ones. Next up, we have Jazz. And Jazz is once again back after the buff on Misfortune. So this is like an early board for this comp where you are playing around getting Misfortune to 3-star. You could also argue that you are getting Bard to 3-star as well, especially if he is the headliner, but else this is the board that you're looking for. One thing I want to mention is if you can hit this early, it is quite good. If you cannot hit it early, it is probably not a good option to play. The main thing about it is that it is quite cheap, and that means we can get up in levels after hitting the board quite fast. So the main thing is attack speed items on Misfortune, healing, mana, AP items on Bards, and tank items on Echo and Nico. And then we're just putting everything else that makes sense on Lucian if possible. Dash Jazz, crit, and more items is good options. So what we're looking for after hitting this could be going into a board look like this. So once again, we have similar items, but we are start changing out the front line. So if we can get to level 9, we will start putting in some of these units. If we're having Bard as a headliner, we could go with 6, so we are getting 2 in Dazzlers. Having Misfortune as headliner, where we are having Jazz as well, we can play Jin instead to get 2 in the big shot. So picking between one of these and playing all of the other units. This is also one of the comps where we are in a situation having Misfortune as a 2-star and we're suddenly hitting a Lucian as the headliner. We can pick him, put items over, and just play another Misfortune 2-star into this board. Next up, we have KDA. And in this comp, we can either play with Ahri or Seraphine and even Akali as our headliner. And that is why if you decide from the start of the game that you want to play this comp and you are getting items and augments that fits it well, you could just force it, since even if you are hitting Seraphine early, you're just going to play around her. And if not, you can also just play to go to level 8 fast as possible and get one of these 2 units as our headliner. No matter what you hit, you can choose any of them as your headliner. That means either KDA, Spellweaver, or Executioner is all options that you can go for. KDA is the best one, Spellweaver the second, but else just pick it and go for a free top 4. When it comes to items, classic items on the Kali, healing and red buff is always performing well. Ahri is going for blue buff, Gunblade, and Tooth. If we're playing Seraphine, we would go for a Morello and a Sojin. And if we are playing her as a headliner, we will get the last item from Superfan, which will be at Death Cap. If we're playing Akali as our headliner, we will get ourselves a Hand of Justice. And when it comes to Ahri, we will get ourselves a Death Cap as well. Augments, Jewel Lotus, Raise the Tempo, and Infusion is all good augments. If we're getting ourselves to level 9, we could play something like Karthus to get 2 in Executioners. We could also play something like Ilaoi if we're hitting that, and we could also play something like Senna. All of these are great options at level 9. We will not put items on Karthus. We could put attack speed items on Senna, and we could put tank items on Ilaoi. The other 2 units that we're putting tank items on is Echo and Nico. We can have something like anti-magic resist, and else we just go for classic tank items. It doesn't really have to be these, it could be anything, and we're obviously only going to put the spark on one of them. Next up, we have Punk Jinx. And this comp have been rising up again. We know it from before, and what we're looking for is Jinx as our headliner. And we strongly recommend to play around Rapid Fire. If we are getting that, it is just easier to play. Get that and then just try to get her to 3-star. If we're getting ourselves a Vi, Pantheon, Twitch, Vex, or a Mumu to 3-star easily, we are also going for that. The most important thing is to get Jinx to 3-star. So the classic one is to play from a lose streak, 5 lose streak, and then just try to hit her just before we are getting up in level. Preferably, we are not rolling down to lower than 30 gold on the big roll down, but else, if we're just missing one, we could go for it anyways. But else, just get up to 50 gold again on the 3rd stage, and then just try to hit her with all gold above 50. When you have done that, look for Twitch at level 6 if possible, and the same goes for Pantheon. If you're not even close, just go up in level and see if you can hit a Mumu. It is not a must to get all of these units to 3-star. It is just showing that these units have an impact if they are getting to 3-star. When it comes to augments, we are looking for something like return on investment. A specific one is good as well. And when it comes to items, we can use most of the items that are using bow. And that means everything from Giant Slayer, Last Whisper, and Rage Blade. These is probably the best items that you can go for. And we could even argue that we are going for something like Hurricane, but that is just like a last option. Once again, Twitch items, the same as I mentioned before. Tank items on Pantheon and Amumu. The one that we are getting to 3-star is the one that we are preferring to put items on. If possible, we could swap out Neeko with Yorick. And are we in the situation where we are getting to level 9, we could even choose to put in something like Illari to make the comp even stronger. So this is probably your best board at level 9. Next up, we have Twisted Fate with Disco, and it is just the classic one that we all know. We are going for Blitzcrank in the front line with all the tank items. We're having Twisted Fate in the back line with attack speed or AP/mana items, and the same goes for 6. We are just building up around Disco and Dazzler all the way up, and when we get to level 8, we will do a roll down to hit either Twisted Fate or Blitz as our headliner. If we want Blitz, it has to be the Disco one. If we are going for Twisted Fate, we can choose either of them. So there's 3 options that we can choose between. When it comes to augments, we are going for a specific one, crit, or another specific one. It is just all about these classic one as Twisted Fate, buff him up as much as possible. And as you can see in the trait, we need one more from Disco. That could be from Blitz or Twisted Fate. We could also have one more in Dazzler, and that could also come from Twisted Fate. This is the level 9 board, and obviously before you're finding one of these 2 units, you could also go for something like Lux instead of 6, or you can just go for something like Sec instead of Illari before you're finding them. So basically just put in one of these 2 units, and when you get up to level 9 or level 8 or whenever you hit them, you're just gonna put them in instead. And I do recommend that you're having most of your units to 2-star before you start going to level 9 and adding in the stronger units. Next up, we have Crowd Diver Katarina. And this is just the classic Crowd Diver Katarina comp, where you are playing 6 in that trait, and you're getting yourself an extra Hand of Justice from Superfans, and else you're just gonna get her to 3-star, get up in levels, and get all of the Crowd Divers in. Tank, Bruiser, AD items are going on Yone and Set. All of these items is quite good on both of them, and else we're just gonna put tank items on Neeko. We would prefer to have Katarina as our headliner, but there is also options where we are getting Set as well. That is in a situation where we are just simply not hitting her to 3-star and going up in levels instead and see if we can get Set. Another option could also be to go for Set if you are just getting perfect items for him and not really items for Katarina. But preferably we are getting her to 3-star, getting one of these 2 items on her and getting the last one for free, get to 3-star, get up in levels and play this board. It is a quite good comp if you are hitting it in a right situation. All of these augments is quite good for obviously reasons, making everyone crit, give more damage to Katarina, and get ourselves more of the unit that we need. Are we getting ourselves in the situation where we can get to level 9? We can put in something like Zac just to buff up Set a little bit more. Next up, we have Riven Reroll, and this is the comp that we already know, and what we are looking for is Riven as our headliner. In the best case, we are getting ourselves a 4-bit, means we can play 4 in that trait and 5 in Edgelord and playing this exact board. In this situation, we are looking for these items. It is specific items where we are looking for, but the main thing is that we are getting Quicksilver, which is her main item, and it is very important. But else, other things that healing and other things that are making ourselves alive is good as well. That could be something like Hand of Justice. And now you're getting some of the artifacts. You could go for another healing. You could also go for an overall good item like this one. But else, look for these. The same items can kind of go on Yone, but only if you are getting him to 3-star. Else, we're just going to put the items on Viego and play this board. Augments that we're looking for is getting ourselves more units. It could also be a specific one, and it could also be something that buffs everyone who are having a Titan, since it is a quite good item on most of the units. If we are not getting Riven as a 4-bit, we are obviously taking the other one. And this is where we kind of have to play around 7 instead. And that means we have to play with Yasuo and just skipping the last one. Are we in this situation where we are getting to level 9? We could start playing in something like Kiana as well. And are we in this situation where we are getting an 8-bit? We will put the 8-bit on Viego. Do we have the other option where we are playing with the 8-bit instead and are getting to this situation? We will skip something like Kiana and see if we can get 6 in that trade instead. Doing so, we will play Corki and we will also put the 8-bit on Viego. A last thing would be to put Caitlyn in the same side as Riven, since we don't want Riven to get stuck, and Caitlyn kind of helps her getting out of that situation. Next up, we have Bruiser Olaf. And this is a very specific one where you are getting a lot of Olaf natural in your shop, and you're also getting Olaf as your headliner, and it has to be Bruiser. So what you can do is to play 6 Bruisers, and the one that you are skipping is some Kench, but else you're just playing all of the others, and you obviously are playing him in the mid or early game before you're hitting one of the big guys. But get Olaf to 3-star and put items that are similar to this. You could even go for 2 or 3 Titans, but else these are the best items. Zed and Zac would go for similar items, and we are also only going for 1 Even Shroud, but else tank items and these kind of items is quite good. AP and mana items will go on Karthus. So what you want to do is to get Olaf 3-star, get up in levels and just put in these units. It is super good and Olaf is super strong if you're getting him to 3-star very early. All of these augments is just a must pick. If you see them, you're just gonna pick them up. The stats is just telling us that this is very, very broken. But again, only broken because you have to hit a very specific start. Next up, we have country. And this comp is mainly about playing 7 in the board. So what we can do is to get either Samira or Urgoth as a country headliner. We do prefer Samira, but are we hitting Urgoth? We will pick it up. And this is like only the options that we can do. There is only one other real option, and that is Tahm Kench. And that means you have to hit it early and have a massive win streak from that. And then just getting into level 7 fast as possible and getting all of these units to 3-star fast. But else I would prefer Samira or Urgoth. So are we in a situation where we are getting the headliner that we want? And even possible to build an emblem, we will go for 7. If this is not the case where we don't have the emblem, we kind of go for 5 instead. And the unit that we are mainly skipping would be Katarina, since she doesn't really do anything without being a headliner and without playing around her. So this is the board that we're looking for, and from here we will just put in whatever fits the board the best. If possible, we will go for something like Illaoi, but else we're just playing the strongest units that we can find. When it comes to items, we are going for the classic Samira items, classic Vex items. If we are not getting Vex to 3-star, we will argue that we are not putting items on her. Urgoth wants some sort of healing and some sort of damage items, and the tank items will mainly go on Amumu. Getting ourselves more units, a specific one, and return on investment is all quite good. And are we getting to level 9? We can just play whatever fits the board. It could be Kiana, it could be Illaoi. If we are not that lucky, we could even play something like Zac. And once again, are we hitting an emblem, we will put in something like Katarina again, so we can get 7 in the trade. Are we in the situation where we are not hitting country and we are just taking executioner? We will obviously just put in another executioner so we can get 4 in that trade as well. That also means that we have to play Katarina once again. And the last one is Reroll Annie, where we are going for one of the 2 traits Annie have. We can use both of them. And the situation where we want to play this board is getting ourselves a lot of Annie units naturally and hitting Annie as a headliner. So we can get Annie to 3-star fast and get up in levels. So this board is where we are not really playing for the super fans. And that means we're not getting an item for free. We could do that early and that will be a dual gauntlet, but else we're just playing similar items. Get yourself a Spear of Chosen, get yourself a Gnashed Tooth, and a last item that do damage. Lulu could also be an option. It could also be an option to play around Lulu, but Annie is gonna be the main carry. If you are seeing yourself getting Lulu to 3-star, do that and give her a lot of mana items so we can buff up the units around her. Ahri is just gonna play around her classic kit, and Echo is the one that's gonna hold tank items or magic resist or anti-heal. And when it comes to augments, whatever just fits. Raise the tempo, emotional connection, and Jewel Lotus is all good. Are we getting ourselves to level 9? And even with Spellweaver, we can choose to play around Emo. And the way we're gonna do that is to put in Poppy and to put in Vex. That also means that we are letting go of KDA, and this is just your board instead. It is the best performing board, but obviously are we not hitting this, we could easily just go with the other one where we are not playing Poppy and we are just playing with Nico instead and playing around the KDA. Oh, and of course you're gonna put in Sona instead of Seraphine. That was all for now. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in my next guide.